For introducing me. Ooh, and I'm broadcasting out. Okay, great. Am I showing up? Well, I guess there's a bit of a delay. Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name is Tom Albritton. I'm the director of the State Ethics Commission, and I appreciate you showing up for this quarterly training for new lobbyists. We did. Hang on, for those who are attending by webinar, we're having some technical issues. I really don't like hearing us. Absolutely insane. So for those of you who showed up live, I mean, you get all the fun stuff. And you get to hear the jokes that people online don't get to hear. So just a quick survey of everybody in the room. Who are you registered for? Who are you lobbying for? Healthcare. Okay, great. How about you?
Nonprofits, private foundations, as Aspire Philanthropy,
Okay. All right. And I already know about you. How about you?
I have a company called Politica Inc. and we lobby for a myriad of folks, healthcare, CBD, different things, municipalities.
Okay, great. So everybody here is under contract to do all this. And I assume, are you registered in other states?
No, not currently.
Okay, anybody? Oh, were you? Okay, good. Well, one thing that you'll find, if you've had any exposure out of state or even on the federal level, is that what our Ethics Act allows is remarkably similar in terms of who it affects and what you can give and what you are prohibited from giving, that sort of thing. Now, for those of you who are attending by webinar, if you have questions, you can text them to the number that's on the screen behind me. I will not answer those questions until the end of the session because a good bit of what you may have questions about, I hope will be answered in the course of what will be about an hour-long presentation. If you have technical difficulties, however, alert us to that, and we may be able to troubleshoot that for you. Okay. Hang on just a second. I've got to get my passcode out. And so I'm going to. If you want my stuff, that's how you get it. All right, so just text your questions or any difficulties you may be having to this number. Now, one thing I want you to remember is that what I tell you in this presentation is the floor, it's not the ceiling. These are the bare minimum ethical guidelines that you as lobbyists are required to follow. You can certainly go above and beyond what is allowed here or provided for here. Second of all, nothing that I tell you or that anybody else who is associated with the commission tells you in this seminar gives you any kind of legal protection. Well, of course, I wasn't here then, but the truth is that I don't think Governor Hunt asked for any protection either. But the point that I was getting to is that there is a method for getting protection, and I'll talk about that. Our opinion process can provide you legal protection here, but this is not what I'm giving you today. Okay, this is just a general overview of the Act, and so I'm compelled to tell you that. Now, our commission is made up of 5 individuals, and again, that is a model that is reflected in every state, at least that I'm aware of. Our commission is appointed by the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House to serve staggered 5-year terms. And so every year somebody's rolling off and somebody's coming on, but the membership is changing annually on the commission. Currently, our chair is Beverly Brady. She's a lawyer from Auburn. We have John Plunk, who is a lawyer from Athens, Alabama, and he also is in the private sector. He owns a business that's been operating up in Athens for several years now, but he's on the commission. He's our vice chair. We have former Chief Justice Lynn Stewart, who I know you're well familiar with being from Fairhope. She's from Baldwin County. And what this also reflects, I hope you can pick up, is that our commission generally reflects the geographic diversity of the state. So you have people from North Alabama, Central Alabama, and South Alabama, too. But Justice Stewart is on the commission. We have Stan McDonald, who is a lawyer from Huntsville. And then our newest appointee is General Ed Kroll, who is Brigadier General, retired Air Force, and also worked 4 years ago and is rotated back onto the commission. He is not a lawyer. The other ones are lawyers. Historically with the commission, most of our commissioners were not lawyers. And then starting about 5 years ago, those appointing authorities started appointing lawyers to the board, or to the commission. So there was a period of time when all 5 of our commissioners were lawyers. But now we have a lay member on there who is serving his second term or second set of terms. I think it's a very good thing that we have a non-lawyer on there, and also somebody who has worked in the private sector and understands the interests of those parties and those stakeholders in the Ethics Act as well. But they're the ones who make all the official decisions. So any formal advisory opinion that we approve, the commissioners actually have to vote on it, and they're the ones who approve it. Any case that we've got and they make a determination of probable cause, they're the ones who actually vote on it. They're the ones I work for, and I manage a staff of 14 people. Vicki Manning is the one you may have already dealt with. She is your go-to person with the commission. She is our lobbyist liaison. If you have any question about what you need to file, what you need to disclose, who you need to talk to, what you need to ask, go to Vicki first, because chances are your question is something that she can answer directly. If it is something other than that, then there are staff who can answer. Our general counsel is in an interview now, but she'll be in about 2:30, and you'll hear from her too. So if you have a question that goes beyond something that Vicki can answer, it's probably going to be one of the 3 of us, if not a combination of the 3 of us, who will answer that question. As I said, there is a way to get protection from the commission for issues that you may have arising under our act, and it's in our opinion process. We've got 2 methods for giving opinions. One is an informal opinion, and one is a formal advisory opinion. An informal opinion does not give you legal protection, but it generally is something that you don't need much legal protection for anyway because of times. A question that you might have is, I've got an event, I know I need to disclose expenditures in excess of $250 that have been made within a 24-hour period on behalf of a public official. However, I participated in that event with 3 other sponsors, and we all shared the expenses. What do I report? We have answered that in a formal advisory opinion, and what we would do in that case is issue you an informal opinion that just cites to that formal advisory opinion. Okay, so it's something that's fairly low-hanging fruit. It's something that we can answer for you easily. If you have a question that is going into new territory, you're asking us to define whether you are a lobbyist for A, B, or C purpose based on your conduct. That's something that you might want to get reduced down to a formal advisory opinion, because that does give you protection from prosecution. The key difference in how you get those opinions, they've both got to be requested in writing, and you get a writing or an answer in writing to both of those. But our formal advisory opinions have to be voted on by our commission, and they only meet every 60 days. Most of the questions you have need a faster turnaround than that. So often, just the necessity of how you work and what you need and the time frame in which you need it dictates that you would get an informal opinion over a formal advisory opinion. Just as a practical matter, we can't get you a formal advisory opinion in as fast a turnaround as you may need. Any questions at all about the opinion process, what the difference is between a formal opinion or an informal opinion? Call Vicki. That is your biggest takeaway from this. If you've just got any question at all, just get it to Vicki, and she can get you into the right hands with the commission to handle whatever issue you may have. I've gone over all that. Okay, a complaint process. Our functions at the commission vary, but they fall into basic categories. One is we do education, which this is a part of. We also train public officials, public employees throughout the state on the requirements of the Ethics Act. But enforcement is also one of our key functions that are filed with us. A complaint that is filed with us must state a violation of our act, must be supported by credible and verifiable evidence. But if the complaint is filed with us and it is supported by that evidence, then our investigators would investigate it and determine whether, in their view, it more likely than not states a violation of our act. If they believe that it more than likely states a violation of our act, and the general counsel, assistant general counsel, and I all agree with that, then we present it to our commissioners, who weigh the evidence and make a formal determination. If they find that there's a violation of our act, then they would refer that case to either the attorney of our act as a Class B felony, punishable by between 2 and 20 years in prison. Other violations are a Class A misdemeanor. Okay, so the stakes of it are high. People do go to prison for breaking this law. You can go to prison for breaking this. And most of what you do day in and day out, you're going to be complying with the disclosure requirements that we've got in the registration requirements. Again, that is an easy thing to comply with. However, you are also bound by the restrictions about what you can give public officials and public employees. And that is the only area in which a lobbyist really should exercise caution, because those are the areas where you can really get in trouble if you don't. Additional 180-day extension from our commissioners if they find that there's cause to grant us an extension. So the most that a complaint can be pending in our office is 360 days. The vast majority of them get resolved within 180 days. We have over 500 complaints filed with us a year. That number goes up and down. But the overwhelming majority of cases we've got are either dismissed when we receive them, or they're dismissed after we review them after an investigation, because they just don't state violations of our act. It's important for you to know that we don't just do a cursory review. Even on cases that we close out, our investigators have been instructed by me to investigate them deeply. And in cases that we refer, as much as we can within the time limits that we have placed upon us by the code, we want those cases to be ready for presentation to a grand jury by whatever group we hand it off to. So we want to give a finished product to them. So our investigators work really hard. They work very deep into a case. And that is because if we refer something against somebody, I want to make sure that we've got confidence that it is in fact a violation, not just a hunch that it might be a violation. So I've told them to go to the end of that case, interview everybody, review every document, because if we refer something, that's likely going to be public. It will be public. It will likely be known by people who live in the area where the public official lives. And so if we're going to do that, that puts a great responsibility on us. We have decided, after looking at the evidence, that it just doesn't state a violation. And when we have dismissed cases, generally that's the end of it. Although the district attorney or the attorney general would have the authority to investigate anything they want to investigate. But we take it as a point of pride that we investigate our cases deeply, and our investigators do a great job with that. Statute of limitations for that case has to be filed with us within 4 years of the violation date in order for us to consider it as a felony, okay, or 2 years as a misdemeanor. Most of the things that are misdemeanors would be filing violations. If you had somebody who intentionally didn't file a disclosure they're required to disclose, that would be a misdemeanor with us. An intentional violation would be giving a public official something to corruptly influence their official action. Lay people often use the word bribery to describe that conduct, but that kind of thing would be a felony. So you can see that the code of ethics covers a wide range. Would say, well, yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense that that's a felony. Any questions about that? Any questions about our the complaint process or investigative process, or the penalties for violating the act? Okay, great. I appreciate you shaking your head. I mean, that at least that is some response. I mean, all of y'all are doing it, and I appreciate it. People in the webinar, you don't have that luxury because I can't see you. But the audience is, the 5 people who are in here are doing a great job. We also have the ability to issue administrative resolutions, and we do a lot of that. Administrative resolution is just a method by which we can fine violators for conduct. It's not a guilty plea. It's more akin to like a no contest, but it's something other than that. It is a finding that there was a minor violation, and the legislature has given us the authority to fine up to $6,000 per violation for that. Okay, but we can only impose that fine if the district attorney or the Alabama's attorney general consent to the resolution of the case in that manner. So under the code, we have a lot of authority to resolve these cases in a very flexible kind of way that takes into account the severity of the action, the conduct, the intent, all of that. But there's always a check on the other side of that. That's either our commissioners or ultimately the district attorney or the attorney official position in a way to benefit themselves, their business, or their family. Now, for a public official, their family members are defined as their spouse and their dependents, their siblings and their spouses, their in-laws, and their parents. So it's a wide group of people. And businesses which they're associated would be any business that employs them, or that they own more than 5% of the stock in, or they're on the board of directors of. Okay, so those would be the groups that they cannot use their official position to benefit, and that's the general theme of the Act, and everything else just kind of fits under it. Every other section of our Act is some variation on this overall theme. Now, prohibitions for lobbyists is that you cannot provide a thing of value to a public official or a family member of the public official. Now, a thing of value is defined in the Act, and I'll go into that in a second. But the other prohibition on you is that you can't give anything to any public official or public employee for the purpose of corruptly influencing their official action. Now, those are two simple things to do, and you give them a bunch of money and say, if I give you this, I want you to vote for this. That's kind of really what we're talking about here. The thing of value is defined as any gift, benefit, favor, service, gratuity, tickets or passes to an entertainment or sporting event. I mean, it is Alabama, so you know that's going to make its way in to the definition of thing of value. And there's a lot of history behind that being in there. But think about our offers of future employment. So a good kind of shorthand way to think about this definition is one, that it's a broad definition. Two, most of those items listed in the definition have some monetary value attached to them. It's something that is reducible down to a dollar amount. So you've got gifts, you got favors. That doesn't obviously have a dollar figure attached to it, but if it's a favor that could ultimately be reduced and have financial value, then that would clearly fit within the definition of it. Tickets to sporting events, that's got a dollar figure attached to it. Offer of future employment, that's another thing that's got dollar attached to it. So if there's a pecuniary gain wrapped up in whatever you're offering, let's just assume that it's within the definition of thing of value. Now, fortunately for you, there are a number of exceptions to that definition, the main one being that anything that is $25 or less is specifically accepted from the definition of thing of value. I don't expect you to jump up and down and say, well, yeah, that makes it so easy, because, I mean, $25, granted, is not a ton of money, okay? Now, for most of you, there are about 17 other exceptions that will also fit nicely into what you will generally want to do. Informational purpose to it, and has a minimum of 12 people who you reasonably expect will attend the event. Okay, you've got educational events, so any type of event within the state of Alabama that is focused around an agenda with educational purposes behind it may span a number of days. There are things you can provide in conjunction with both of those events. Economic development functions is another exception. If you have an event that is reasonably tailored to achieve a specific economic development goal, then again, there are other items that you can provide to them in conjunction with that. You can give rooms, you can give registration costs, you can give meals that are associated with it, that are, and hospitality that is an integral part of that overall event. That's going to get most of your stuff. So if you think about the larger associations like the BCA, when they have their event, or when they had their event, certainly in years past, and they go down to the Grand Hotel, and public officials, public employees would go down there, and they would cover the rooms for them, and they would have meals on site for them, and they would have hospitality associated with that. Might be a reception. All of that kind of stuff is allowed. During the session, you have legislative receptions that larger groups put on, and so that's an exception that would qualify as one of the widely attended events that's recognized under the Act. So during the legislative session, there will be something at the Archives building, what you would think of as a reception. So those kind of things are allowed. Given the survey, at least in the room here, most of you are not dealing with associations. You're going to be dealing with probably maybe one-on-one type of events with the legislature. Am I reading the room right? I'm getting head nods. For you, there is a specific meal exception that allows you to spend as a lobbyist $25 per occasion with an annual cap of $150. Your principal can spend $50 with an annual cap of $250 for meals alone. Okay, so there is a separate meal exception to that. What I would say is that if you want to, that with what I'm saying, but if that is what your function will be, you will be providing food or you'll be providing beverages as part of it. Just ask us about that, and we'll see if it qualifies within one of the exceptions to it. Keep in mind that we're limited in what we can say qualifies because the code limits it, and there are a lot of exceptions, but they're the exceptions, and that's what we have to rely on. And also always remember de minimis. Now, I don't know if the principals that you're working for may have promotional items they want to give to legislators. However, there's a separate exception for promotional items or items that have little intrinsic value. Generally, that exception covers, a collection of cups and koozies and items that have a logo on it that your principal has stamped on it. I mean, generally those things don't have a great value in the open market. I mean, I don't know the name of who your principal may be, but it's hard to kind of go on eBay and sell that kind of thing, a water bottle that's got it stamped on it. But you get the point. And now, there have been, again, it's got little intrinsic value except to the person who has received it. And it might be a recognition of a new industry that's moving into the state, and there may be, some statute or something that is relevant to that employer. So the point, again, is to ask. The person I would go to begin with would be Vicki, and then she can get you to the right person with the commission who can answer that question. That's a very general overview of the allowances, but do you have any questions about what I've brought up? If you have an event that you want to put on, the code allows you to ask us ahead of time whether that event satisfies the exceptions to the definition of thing of value, and if it does, we can pre-certify, and that's a defined term in our act, pre-certify the event. If you will go on our website, there will be a tab at the top of the website that has pre-certifications. You can click on that, and a calendar will drop down, and you can click on events that other people have had pre-certified. When we pre-certify an event, we put it on our calendar, and we also scan the documents that were submitted to us in support. Beneficial to you for a couple of reasons. One, in terms of planning, you can see what other people are doing and when they're doing it. But also, you can see what we have approved. You can see the general format that people who may deal with us a lot have used. So it may help you out in requesting for your own event. But once it is pre-certified, the pre-certification itself is considered an exception to the definition of thing of value. So we are saying that satisfies the exception, and then you can do it. Now, we may have some follow-up questions, but that's how that process works. So I encourage you to access the website and look at that if you have an interest in that pre-certification process, because I think it can save you some legwork if you access that. Okay. If you want pre-certification, though, you've got to request it at least 10 days ahead of time. We have an administrative rule that says we can't grant pre-certification on less than 10 days notice. So be sure to request it at least 10 days out. Any questions about the pre-certification process? Am I just throwing this at you way too fast, or am I making any kind of sense? Thank you. I appreciate that. It sounds good. That's the first step. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's all right. I'm clear enough. I say that because I can be confusing, and I recognize that. So it's really more of my insecurity about how adequately I'm communicating this information than it is about whether I think you can receive it. It's not all that hard. There's just a lot of stuff, and we've got an hour, because about an hour is about the most I could expect anybody to hang out in this room discussing this topic. So I got to give it to you kind of quick. 2 years generally. Question was, Elizabeth just gave me an ugly look like you need to repeat the question for everybody who's attending by webinar, and we've got about 20 of y'all. I hope. We're supposed to have about 20 of y'all. The question was, what is the time frame in which a public official must wait before that public official can begin lobbying? The general prohibition is 2 years. 2 years you can't, as a former public official, lobby the body that you were a member of, which would be the legislature. Now, there are other avenues in which a public official could lobby, but you cannot lobby the body that you were a member of for 2 years. So the general answer is 2 years. Okay. Any other questions about that? All right. Thank you. Thank you for responding. Okay. Cynthia's here right now. On the economic development function, is that something that to you who were sitting in the room, is that something that would maybe fit within your business model or the legislation you're wanting to?
Yes.
You would? Okay. What kind of event? So we have one yes in the audience.
So like any kind of economic development that may be happening in the municipality that I'm currently serving, tax abatements and working all that stuff out, coming into the municipality.
Right, and so you're bringing maybe the local delegation in to that sort of thing. Yeah, remember that, and what was described was basically what you would think of as an economic development function, a function that whose ultimate goal, the ultimate goal of which is to maybe land a prospect or to market the area for ultimate location of an existing industry or somewhere else, so like a relocation or maybe even an expansion of an industry. As a general description, that's exactly what an economic development function would be. If you want to request approval for that sort of thing, what I would tell you is in your request, you've got to identify the specific economic development goal you wish to achieve. In your case, it would be, we want this company to locate.
Landing a Publix. Say that.
Sure, and in economic development, often you are not. There's a confidentiality around the prospect, and so we can handle that too. All that's got to be identified is the economic development goal you hope to achieve, but you've got to identify that. So if you wanted to have a nationally known retail, I point that out, as we have had requests before where people have said this general function would be good for the economy because it would generate income for businesses in town or something. And that kind of event may fit under one of the other exceptions, but economic development is really very narrow in its application. But we have recognized it a number of times for other people. But my point to you would be, what kind of things should I keep in mind? I mean, we handle those questions. I handle them directly, a number of times a week, where people will call and say, "This is what I want to do. What kind of issues should I be aware of?" Also, remember, you don't have to have an event pre-certified in order to do it. If you have it pre-certified, however, it gives a layer of comfort to those who were attending, and also it should give you a layer of comfort too, because it's been stamped approved by the commission. So that's one of those protections that you can get. You don't have to ask for it. And a number of people don't. I mean, there are people who have receptions all over the town. They've never asked us to approve it, and they're not doing anything wrong as far as I know. But I know that the people who have asked for it and have had it pre-certified have that layer of protection too. Widely attended event. I think I've talked about that. Again, the nature of those are going to be attended event is not limited by geography. But a widely attended event is something that is a little more targeted. It's smaller. You might invite both committees of the legislature that deal in the area you're lobbying in to some presentation you may have somewhere that has a dinner included with it. That kind of event very well may be a widely attended event, probably will be, because if you're inviting both committees to it, your number's clearly going to exceed 12 who you would reasonably expect to attend. So remember, you've got that too, and a number of groups will do that during the session. They'll have a dinner at Central here in Montgomery, down at the bottom level of it, or somewhere else, where they will talk about upcoming legislation, whatever, in conjunction with a meal too. So, but widely attended event has to have that type of a feel to it, and it's got to have an informational component. It can't just be a social event. You can't just have a party because you're inviting more than 12 people. We have had people before. It's been a long, long time, but early on, when the widely attended event exception was recognized, I think somebody planned a hunting trip in Montana, and they wanted that to be a widely attended event. The commission said no, that it had to be something more than just purely social. So back then, they articulated this standard that it has to have an informational component to it, and we have certainly furthered that since 2015 too. And again, that could be helpful to you. Looking at the pre-certifications we've approved could be helpful to you in kind of seeing how we have viewed widely attended events too. All right, so as part of these events that are exceptions to the definition of thing of value, generally the common features of them are a speaker or panel participant presenting information that's related to their agency, and that's who can have the expenses covered, or people who are in there attending this in that capacity. So if you've got a member of the health committee who's coming down to your conference and is going to be speaking about maybe legislation that came through the House or through the Senate in the previous term, that's going to be deciding these issues that might be coming forward, or might have considered the issues as it came before them, can be down there. They're down there in their official capacity, and it's part of their official duties to consider these kind of issues. So actual and necessary expenses for the legislator and for their spouse, including room and food that I've described to you, that's an integral part of the overall function. Hospitality too has to be an integral part of the overall function. Hospitality is not defined in our act, but how it has typically been recognized by the commission and through the course of conduct and practice with those who deal in this area, not that is allowed under the Act too. So with the larger groups, you'll see golf, you'll see fishing from time to time. What we have not approved are standalone events like that, a fishing trip that's just a fishing trip, or a golf trip that's just a golf trip. However, if it's part of the overall function of it, it's not competing with any of the programming for the educational function, then we have said that is hospitality that is allowed under the Act. Right. So as you can tell, even though the definition of thing of value is very broad, there are a lot of exceptions that typically cover the things that I think most lobbyists want to provide anyway, and are kind of customary from state to state to be provided to legislators. So there's a lot of allowance too for what you can do. Yes, sir.
Are there any exceptions or differential when it comes to hospitality on private property or versus public property or state-owned property, for example?
The question was, do the exceptions apply differently for the recipient, not the location in which it is being given? So it really doesn't matter if it's private property or public property. And we've had events that have occurred on private property before, but they're treated the same. Any other questions about that? Yeah, just again, remember that the prohibition is based on your identity as a lobbyist and their identity. I've talked about that. Okay, when you request pre-certification, I will likely ask you for a list of your invitees. I will ask for how many people you expect to attend. That's generally reflected in the number that you invite. And the reason that we do that is the code requires that investigation is such a loaded term, but I mean, we've got to do due diligence and making sure that at least the people you have invited, you should reasonably expect to attend. Not that anybody would do this, but if you invited 11 people from New Hampshire to come to this thing on a Tuesday night in Montgomery and one person from Montgomery, clearly you wouldn't reasonably expect that 11 people from New Hampshire would come. I know that's an extreme example, but just bear with me. I'm kind of going on the fly here. However, if you give me a list of everybody who is in both committees in the House and in the Senate, those are reasonably expected to attend because they're already here, okay? And it makes sense given what they do that they would come to your function. Now, from time to time, we have had commissioners for whom it has been important that you have a sign-in sheet at these. We have not required that as a commission. However, in the past, and if you hear anybody say it, it's true that there have been events where we have done that. But in the normal course of business, it is just incredibly difficult to stop people at the door and get these things done in a reasonable time if everybody's got to sign in. So where we settled on it was you send us your invitation list. You can't guarantee who's going to show up. But if you got to have 12 and you've invited 75, I think you're good. And I have not seen a person yet who's invited 11 from New Hampshire. It's all going to be people who are local. But, let your mind kind of go on this, because if you think about public property, they don't have to be on private property. You still got to comply with the law. But there are groups that will go municipalities. The League of Municipalities does this. They'll go all over the state, and they'll meet with the delegation from up in Northeast Alabama, and they'll invite them from a number of districts over there. And then they'll go to the northwestern part of the state, and then the central part of the state, and the southwest and southeast, and they'll get these things done or get their business done, rather, through a series of widely attended events. They can occur year-round. They don't have to just be during the session. So just remember, these are tools that the code gives you to do your job in a legal way. And we're more than happy to kind of help you structure those. There are any number of examples of people who do it correctly. I know that with CBD, there have been, I think, some events. I know that groups that have been advocating for the legalization of marijuana, I think, have had some events too. There may be some in our archives on our pre-certifications. You can search by the name of the sponsor. And so you may find some information that way. Healthcare, clearly there's been some municipalities, there have been a ton of them. Nonprofits, there have been a number. And keep in mind that for-profit and nonprofit is all analyzed essentially the same way when it comes under our act in terms of allowances and prohibitions. Any questions about any of that? If I got any coming in via text? Okay. And I've talked about that, I've talked about that, I've talked about that, I've talked about that. I ramble a lot, but I generally get most of the points made. Okay, on the integral part, the hospitality and food and beverage has got to be an integral part of it. There's some key characteristics that must be in conjunction with the event, and everybody who is invited to the event must be given an opportunity to participate in it. So think about a group dinner for all the attendees, or an outing that is an integral part of it, given when it is in the schedule, but that everybody has the opportunity to attend. Where a group can get into trouble is if they peel off one or two to provide them something that not everybody else gets. Now, in conjunction with some larger events, and I don't think this would apply to the folks in the room, but it might apply to people who are online watching it through the webinar. Every now and then, some groups will want to have a peel-off dinner where they're wanting to invite a select group of people out to go do something. If it's down in Fairhope, it may be the Fairhope Inn or any number of other restaurants, and I know you've probably seen it. It might not be at the Grand Hotel, but it might be in one of the local restaurants. When we have pre-certified that, what I have liked to see is all of that broken down as to who's kind of doing what and what they're inviting. And if I can separately pre-certify the dinner, the peel-off dinner is a widely attended event, I'm a little bit more comfortable doing it that way. So if you have an event where you want to do that sort of thing, again, think creatively with me and the exceptions, and if it can be a widely attended event, let's just call it that. You get the same protection, but at least it narrowly defines what you're doing and who you're doing it for. And so much of what our job is to have public disclosure of what it is y'all are doing it and who you're doing it for, so that the public, if they're interested, can have access to it and can see who's influencing whom. So those are the basic characteristics that we look for something to be an integral part of it. This is the drop down for pre-certifications looks like this if you go to our website. And now, granted, there are not going to be a ton of them up there this year because COVID's killed most people's stuff. There haven't been a whole lot of parties going on since about February. There were a lot of them scheduled, and everybody canceled them. Some people have gone. So there might not be a ton of material up there for you to look at that's recent, but this is where you would go, and that's what it would look like. Regarding the meal limit, the separate expenditure that I told you can have as a lobbyist 25 with an annual cap of 150, principal 250. You can't stack those. I mean, you can't stack your 25 with the principal's 50 and get more than you otherwise would be entitled to as the lobbyist. It's got to be an either or. Okay, either your principal's paying or you're paying. And again, remember your annual cap there, but keep the stacking limitation in mind. Going over that. Going over that. Be aware of this opinion. If given the areas in which you are lobbying, you may have events in healthcare that brings in a whole lot of interests that might want to join forces, so to speak, to present information to public officials through an educational function. Remember this advisory opinion, 2018-01. You can access this through our website. It allows for the aggregation of certain expenses when you have multiple groups putting on a conference. The BCA asked us in 2018 to give an opinion about that, and we did. There's too much in that opinion for me to summarize here. Just remember that it's there. And what it allows is for limited aggregation, requires for designation of sponsor that is $250 or more in a 24-hour period. So at the end of the day, your reporting's just got to accurately reflect what you spent, but the opinion tells you how to maneuver through some situations that might not otherwise be clear when you've got a bunch of people putting money into a pot that's then going to be distributed, for an event that's benefiting 500 public officials who are attending. So it's a bit of a roadmap in that opinion for how you can allocate your expenses in a way that also is in compliance with the Act. If that advisory opinion doesn't answer your question, you can follow up with us and we can give you further definition. All right, any questions about that? Are you still clear on what I'm saying, or are you just... If you're not glazed over, I'm actually kind of impressed. You seem reasonably happy. Huh? Well, that's something. What I would expect you to remember is that you can't give stuff to public officials in order to corruptly influence their official action. If you are giving them anything at all, perhaps you should request from us whether it's allowed or not. And at the end of the day, if you're just throwing up your hands saying, I am so confused, I don't know what to do, call Vicki. Okay, and we'll talk you down, and we'll get you to the right people, and we'll answer your questions. But the larger point is that it's all on Vicki, but she can handle it, so it's a good thing to send you to her. But the overall point is this: there's no reason for you to have angst about this. There's no reason for you to flounder around not knowing the answer. Even if it's not ethics, okay, just ask us, and we'll tell you that in ethics. You were worrying about something that you just do not need to worry about. We'll tell you that. We've often told people that. Said that's not our gig. That's somebody else's gig. It's not our gig, so don't worry about us. Or we may say, yeah, that's a problem. You can't do that. You can't drop that bag of cash over at State House and just say, what will this get me? You can't do that. Again, that's hyperbole. No one's ever done that to my knowledge. If they have done that, they certainly have not told me about it. But you get the general themes here. So let that be your guide. And again, don't flounder around because we're too eager to answer your questions for you. All right, so concluding thoughts on this. When you register with the commission through Vicki, if your registration changes, let's say you pick up a new client, you've got to update your registration within 10 days. So don't forget that. If who you're representing changes, or if you lose somebody, you've got to update that with Vicki within 10 days. As the lobbyist, and with your disclosures, if you have somebody else who is doing it for you, eyeball it, but was doing it and they didn't review it ahead of time. So review it for accuracy. You're saving yourself a heartache down the road. Remember that all of your filings are public. So if there's a reporter out there in the area where you live who is interested in what you're doing, all they've got to do is get on the website and find your disclosures, find your registration. And if there's something there that they think doesn't make sense, they will either first, more likely, write a story about it and then follow up to see whether there's anything wrong with it. Or they just might hound you about something that in the end was not a big deal anyway, and you did it right, but you just filled out the paperwork incorrectly. Either one of those scenarios is avoidable. And more often than not, if you look at it, you'll catch it on the front end. But if you find that you have filed something incorrectly, the last thing we want you to do is to sit there and just sit on your hands and say, well, maybe nobody will know. Because I can promise you, in all probability, somebody will know. But there's also no reason for you to do that, because we want you to update. We want you to correct. If you filled that in incorrectly, just call Vicki and say, I screwed it up and I've got to get something in. There's not a person on the planet that Vicki hasn't said, get it in. She will work with you to get it in. Now, you got to be nice to her, okay? And you've got to be patient with her, and you can't expect her to do the impossible. But if you made an error in your filings, just work with her, because I can promise you that she'll work with you. Remember the 10-day rule for pre-certifications. Review your filings, but communicate with your principals and make sure they're communicating with Vicki. So if you're lobbying for CBD and your CBD company is located in Michigan or Wisconsin or California or New York or wherever, or Alabama, make sure that they have confirmed with Vicki that you're their lobbyist. And I would do it well ahead of time. You're well ahead of the session right now, so make sure that they have confirmed, because every year it's inevitable. We'll get some call saying so-and-so is over there lobbying for CBD or healthcare or some nonprofit, and they're not registered on your website. You'll call over and say, I registered a long time ago. What's the deal? And Vicki will say, you registered, your principal didn't confirm you as their lobbyist, and they have to confirm it before you are officially registered. So call them well ahead of time. Make sure that they know they've got to confirm with Vicki. All right. That's about all that you can absorb in an hour. Have you got any questions before you leave the room? Yes, ma'am. Vicki.
Please tell them, the ones that have gone directly to YouTube, to go back to the main website, click the continue button to get their participation certification done.
You come here. Vicki has an announcement for all of those attending by webinar.
Okay, for everybody participating by webinar, please.
Hang on.
Please go back to the main website at www.ethics.alabama.gov and select the continue button up under the live stream. This will allow you to submit your name and email address to get your participation certificate. If I do not get that email, you do not receive credit, and you listen to him for nothing.
Well, I'd like to think it was not for nothing, but
They don't get credit for it.
but she's right. You won't get credit for it. So it'd certainly be an hour that could have been spent getting credit. I also would like to introduce Cynthia Ralston, who has been in an interview but is here.
Sorry. Hi.
Here, let me just give you.
I don't know how Tom did on my piece, but I bet what he experienced was that sometimes he says what's in my section of the PowerPoint before I stand up to give my section of the PowerPoint. So when he was saying, I've covered this, that is somewhat how I interact with it. But anyway, thanks for coming. I don't know how many are on the webinar, but sorry I missed it, but thanks.
Yeah, and in the course of any day, I tend to do that with any number of things that are under Cynthia's purview. I'm sorry, but
We also complete each other.
yeah, we complete each other's sentences and thoughts. But anyway, Cynthia's, you don't have to just call Vicki, but more often than not, lobbyists just prefer to call Vicki. So if y'all don't have, well, I mean, you know her, you talk to her. Frankly, she's nicer, but so she's earned that. But anyway, before I leave, any questions from those who are in attendance at all?
Opinions on the website.
The question was whether the opinions are on the website. The opinions are on the website. The formal advisory opinions are. Informal opinions are not. They're confidential by administrative rule. But the formal advisory opinions are. Now, I'll tell you, it'd be a little bit tricky sometimes to find the opinions, because over the years they've been cataloged in different ways. But if you've looked on the website and can't find it, and if you wanted to ask us if there's a specific advisory opinion covering a topic, then we're more than happy to find that for you. So that's one of the things you can ask, and Brian will be more than happy to find that advisory opinion for you.
Well, is the minutia of this in the administrative code?
There's not a ton in the administrative code about the ethics code. There are some administrative rules. Most of our definition of the act has been through advisory opinions. So is there any particular topic that, because some of the areas have been the focus of the commission more than others over the last 5 years. Revolving door would be one. There's some opinions. Most of the opinions about educational functions, widely attended events, all of those are going to be around 2010. You need to know that in 2010 there was a major rewrite to the Ethics Act. And so in 2011, the commission generated a number of advisory opinions dealing with the specific exceptions that we've talked about today. So don't spend your time looking at 95 or prior. Look from 2010 forward on those, in particular around in 2011. There were just a slew of opinions that came out then about that. But if you have a specific topic, we're more than happy to help you find that if you can't find it yourself. Any other questions from the group? Thank you for indulging me for an hour. And those of you who are attending my webinar, please be sure to text your questions to us if you have any. There's a bit of a delay between the live and the webinar, but I appreciate your attendance today. And again, just know we're here to help you, so don't be shy about asking. Thanks.